Welcome to the Saturday Cup of Joe podcast. This podcast is dedicated to EAS employees of the U.S. Postal Service and members of the National Association of Postal Supervisors. So, pour yourself a cup of coffee and join us for today's episode. And now, here's your host, Robert Wakefield.
Good morning, Branch 32, and good morning to our EAS friends across the country. Welcome to the Saturday Cup of Joe podcast, presented by the Nashville Post Office Credit Union. I'm your host, Robert Wakefield, president of Branch 32. Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much. It's great to have you all here, so let's go ahead and pour that first cup. Are you stressed over holiday expenses and don't know what to do? Let the Nashville Post Office Credit Union help. We are offering a Christmas loan up to $1,200 at the low rate of 12% for 12 months. Not to mention no payments for 60 days. This offer is valid until January 31st. So stop by our office or visit npocu.org for more information. And for our first cup today, we're going to be talking about the series we started a few weeks ago called Taking Care of Yourself. It's an important series to have because of the time of year we're in right now, the time of year being peak season. And for those employees, those EAS employees and NAPS members that go through peak season, this is perhaps the most stressful time of the year. I can say that for a fact. It is the most stressful time of the year. And the demands that are placed upon you and the things that you have to do only adds to not taking care of yourself. So in our first part of this series, we pointed out the importance of taking your lunch. We talked about that, how important it is that you take your lunch every day because, number one, the ELM provides for you to have a mealtime. And the other thing that we pointed out was that you're not getting paid for it. So it's important not to work through lunch. You're not getting paid. And then the third thing we mentioned about the lunch thing, and I just do this as a reminder, you need it. You need a reset in the middle of your day. So we talked about that in the first part of this series. And then in the last podcast, we talked about stress and how stress can rob you from your mental state. It can just add burdens to you that you don't need. It can take an effect on you in a physical way. It can affect you mentally. It can interfere with your family life. We even pointed out the monthly focus of the EAP website was on stress. And I hope that many of you have gone and visited that website because it is absolutely fantastic. So that's what we talked about in the last podcast. But today I'm going to shift the focus just a little bit. Although it still has the overall theme of taking care of yourself, I'm just going to change it just a bit. And I want to know this question here. I want to know the answer to this question. What is the deal with your boss expecting you to work for free? It seems like it happens a lot. It seems like that I get phone calls about this. Well, I'm not getting paid for that or whatever. Why is that? Why does your boss expect you to work for free? Now, it can come from an MTO. It can come from a postmaster. It can come from an IMPU. Whatever the title is that is your boss, it seems like that this is something that goes on amongst EAS employees, and that's working for free. And I know a lot of you are doing that, and that's just wrong. From what I'm hearing, this topic is starting to get some attention from district leaders. They are wanting to know the supervisors that are working over 50s and 60 hours of a week. Now, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but if you're working over 50 to 60 hours a week, you're now on a list, and districts are starting to notice that. And if you're a special exempt employee, which is most supervisors. Postmasters are not special exempt, most of them, but most supervisors are special exempt. And according to the ELM, the extra time that you work over 8.5 hours in a day, you should be getting paid for that. Here's the ELM's reference. The ELM's reference is 434.143. And it says this: eligible for FLSA exempt EAS additional pay. Here we go. FLSA special exempt employees in EAS 18 positions and below are eligible for EAS additional pay if authorized to work over 8.5 hours on a scheduled day or any hours on a non-scheduled day, even while on a temporary assignment, such as an OIC position. Well, there it is, right there in black and white, right there in the ELM, 434.143. Now, let's go back to our example of working 50 to 60 hours a week. I would guess that in 50 to 60 hours a week, some of you are probably working over 8.5 hours a day. I'm not going to do the math, but I hope you can pick up on the sarcasm that I have in that sentence, because I know many of you are opening and closing an office 12 to 14 hours a day, and you're only getting paid for 8. That's wrong. That's wrong. So one thing that I do want you to underscore about this is in this provision, it says additional pay if authorized. And this is not a free pass for you just to work as much as you want whenever you want. You have to have it authorized. Our state president had a great idea, Donna Aaron. She had a great idea that at about 6.5 hours to 7 hours into your shift, if it looks like you're going to go over the 8.5 hours, you send an email or a text message to your boss and inform them that your carriers are not going to be back, or the mail's not going to be worked. I get off in 2.5 hours. Please advise me if I'm going to be needed to use authorized tea time, as they call it. So it's not a free pass, but get them to authorize that in a physical way, electronic way, where you can actually have that on file. So it's just amazing that some of you are not getting paid. I have to go back to my good friend Brian Wagner. In October 2023, in the 2023 edition of the Postal Supervisor, he wrote an article called "The Tea Time Machine," and he gave the history of tea time, as we call it, paid extra time for workers over 8.5. If you work over 8.5 hours. And he says this in this article. I'm going to read what he wrote here. He says this: on April 12, 2012, Doug Tolino, Vice President, Labor Relations, currently Deputy PMG, issued a USPS memo with the subject, Payment of FLSA Special Exempt Employees. His memo reaffirmed the USPS's position that FLSA Special Exempt employees are to be compensated in accordance with ELM 434.144. And then on July 24th, 2023, Dr. Joshua Colon, USPS Chief Retail and Delivery Officer, sent out a memo that says Supervisor Time Card Administration. And Colon's memo focused on Supervisor Time Card Administration and the critical need for leadership to ensure the accuracy of all supervisor recorded work hours and tax, including extra hours worked, and supervisors adhering to their schedules. So you can see that this is a topic that's been going on for quite some time. And getting paid correctly is what it's all about. So how do I get paid correctly? If I'm a supervisor, and how do I make sure that I'm paid correctly? Well, many of you are on auto clock rings. I always suggest swiping a card. I suggest doing that. I suggest turning in a 1260 if you work over. A PS Form 1260, make yourself a copy and turn it in to your manager. Be sure that you're paid properly. and be sure you get the money you deserve. It's like my good friend Tim Bad Mama Jamma Ford said many years ago. He says, you don't work for the Postal Service, you work for money. And you deserve to get paid for the hours that you work. And that is part of taking care of yourself. All right, I'm ready for that second cup. This holiday season, the Nashville Post Office Credit Union wishes you joy, peace, and prosperity. As we celebrate this special time of year, we're grateful for your trust and your membership. May your days be merry and bright, and your new year filled with success and happiness. From all of us at the Nashville Post Office Credit Union, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And for our second cup today, I thought I would share the story of the post office that I became a postmaster at for the very first time was the Burns, Tennessee Post Office. Now, Burns, Tennessee is a small office. We had 3.5 routes. It's a tiny town, but it was a very close-knit town. And when I got there, the carriers came up to me and said, well, are we going to do an angel tree for those in need in our community? We've done it before. And we can't do this. I don't think we can do this now in the Postal Service, but back then we did. And I said, sure, let's do that. So they took care of it. They got a hold of the people that they knew could find the needy kids, the kids that weren't going to have a Christmas, and we wanted to provide for them a Christmas. We put a tree up in the post office lobby, put the tags on there on what to bring, and the whole town bought Christmas presents for these needy children. It was absolutely fantastic. They would start bringing those gifts in. There were so many gifts that were bringing in. We were making a fire hazard because we had so many gifts, and it was incredible just to see how our post office filled up with presents. So what was really cool about that was the presents would come in. We put the tags on it and all that stuff, made sure they were all set up. And then we set up a Tuesday night, for the families of these children to come and pick up their Christmas presents. And I'll never forget it. It was surely a truly magical moment. The families would come in, we would load the gifts in the car, and they would drive off and thank us profusely. It was just amazing. But one mom in particular has stood out in my mind ever since 2010. I'll never forget her. She was sobbing beside her car, and she looked at me and she said, "My children are going to have a Christmas." You talk about a fantastic, fantastic feeling. The fact that we were able to help children who weren't going to have Christmas that year. We did that for the 3 years that I was there. We did it every year, and it was just an amazing time for us as postal people to give back to the community that we serve. And I know we can't do that kind of stuff today. Welcome to 2024. But that was a magical time, and I thought I would share that story here during this Christmas season. So, there you go. Okay, you know the drill. You know what I'm going to ask for. Sharing is caring. That's right. Be sure to share this with all your NAPSA members and your EAS friends. Let them know what this podcast is about. It's strictly for EAS. And let me tell you something. Let me ask you to do this. Send me an email with your branch number that you're listening. I would love to hear from you. So send those emails to SaturdayCupOfJoe@gmail.com, and I'd love to hear from you. I'm Robert Wakefield, and remember, every great weekend starts with a great cup of Joe. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to the Saturday Cup of Joe podcast. Please note that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of Robert Wakefield and do not necessarily reflect the views of the National Association of Postal Supervisors. We welcome your questions and comments, so send those to to SaturdayCupOfJoe@gmail.com.